So today's conversation was a complete eye opener for me. I am sitting down with Chris Papst, who is an investigative reporter for Project Baltimore in Baltimore, Maryland. And he is the writer of The Failure Factory, which is based on the results of that 9-year investigation. An unbelievable story about Baltimore's public school system. And let me tell you, it's uncomfortable, it's confronting, and honestly, it explains a lot. So, if you've ever been in the education system, particularly in the United States, and mind you, I'm not saying this is everywhere in the United States. This is just what he uncovered in Baltimore, but it sounds pretty common if I am to judge it based on what I see when I go into teacher threads or teacher Instagram or teachers of the US. So, if you have ever thought that you are pushing against something invisible, this is the episode for you. Let's get into it. Hey, Chris, welcome to the podcast and the channel. I am so glad to have you here. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. I can't wait. Let's get into it. So, I touched on this in the intro, but in a nutshell, I would love for you to explain exactly why you were investigating and why an investigation like this was even needed.
Sure. Let's say it was 2016, and I was working as an investigative journalist for the ABC News affiliate in Washington, D.C. And I had gotten a call from the parent company of that station, which is Sinclair Broadcast Group. And they asked me if I'd be willing to move to Baltimore to start this new investigative unit called Project Baltimore. So my wife and I left Washington, D.C., moved just about, 45, 50 miles northeast to Baltimore to start this new life and this new career doing Project Baltimore. So why did I do that? Why did I leave the political center of the world, Washington, D.C., to go to Baltimore, which is a medium-sized, struggling, used to be a major city in America, but now it's a medium-sized city in America that's really struggling. And the reason that I did that was because of the opportunity of what Project Baltimore presented. So, what is Project Baltimore? Well, we're an investigative unit. There's 5 of us. There's 2 photographer editors, 2 producers, and myself. And we work for the local Fox 45 news station, which is also owned by Sinclair Broadcasting Group. And what the idea was behind Project Baltimore was to bring back the old style investigative beat journalism, something that really went away, especially in local communities when journalism is concerned. About 20, 25 years ago, just when the internet came on and advertising dollars are getting fractioned and the media landscape is changing. And one of the things that sort of went away is what we do, the long-term investigative beat reporting, because it's expensive. And it takes 5 of us to do it. And it's a lot of work. And a lot of the media companies just didn't have the money to do it anymore. And Sinclair is trying to bring that back. So that was the opportunity that I had, was to really dig into a topic and really start to understand that topic and become an expert on that topic, which in journalism today is rare. And in January of 2017, over 9 years ago, we moved to Baltimore and launched Project Baltimore. And the first topic that we picked was, and on the tax the topic that we're still on today, it hasn't changed,
Yeah.
is public schools and public education. And the reason that we picked public education is because it is the most important issue in America and the most important issue in many countries, because the quality of your local public school affects every aspect of your life. It affects your home values. It affects your taxes. It affects the strength of your local economy. It affects crime, incarceration rates. We know in America that most people in jail did not graduate from high school. They are undereducated. And many people believe that's why they resort to crime, because they don't have the education that they need to be able to sustain themselves professionally in a job, like a lot of other people do. Now, we know that. That's not an opinion. That's a fact. And so we felt like public education was that important. So we picked public education to be our topic. Over 9 years later, we're still doing it. And specifically, why we picked Baltimore City is because Baltimore City, we could see through federal data in January of 2017, was one of the most funded large school systems throughout the entire country. But it was also one of the lowest performing large school systems academically throughout the entire country. And our question in January 2017 was the how and the why. How is this happening and why is this allowed to happen? And 9 years later, I wrote this book, Failure Factory, because after doing this every single day for 9 years, I think we know the hows and the whys. And the point of this book is really to educate people on what is happening in our public schools, because I don't think a lot of people really understand how public education works.
Yep. No, absolutely. So, with regards to the investigation itself, what would you say were the top three to four key things that you really learned from this investigation?
Well, that's a great question because this book is exactly what I learned. So
Yeah.
in January of 2017, like I thought that I knew how public education operated. My dad was a public school teacher for 35 years. He was a woodshop teacher and in the teachers union. I grew up in a woodshop in a public school. I went to public schools K through 12. My brother did as well. My kids go to public school. My brother's kids go to public school. I thought that I understood how the public education system worked. And in January of 2017, when I started investigating, I realized I didn't understand. So this book is 250 pages of what I didn't know when I started. And I figured that if I grew up in a teacher's household and I didn't know these things,
Yeah.
my assumption would be a lot of people don't know these things. So we'll go over a couple of them. One is I didn't understand how schools are actually funded. A lot of people, and we can get more into this later, but I'll just go into the surface area content of it for now. I think a lot of people think that public schools are funded based on attendance rates or test scores or graduation rates, SAT scores, whatever it may be. And that's just simply not the case. Schools are not funded based on education. The incentive of a school is not to educate a kid to get money. The incentive is to enroll the child to get money. Funding is based on enrollment in Baltimore, in Maryland, and in most states, if not all states in the United States, funding for a school is based on enrollment, not education. A couple other things I learned is that the schools, and I talked to a lot of teachers in the book, is the schools, as a result of how the funding mechanisms are set up,
Mhm.
schools have been incentivized to pass students, not educate students. So in the book, we talk about how in 2025, 71% of Baltimore City school students graduate in 4 years. The graduation rate is 71%, but 12% of the students are proficient in math. How can you be graduating 71% of your kids, but 12% of your kids are proficient in math? Well, it's because of how the funding structure is set up. Schools, according to the teachers that we talk to, they're incentivized to pass students, not educate students. Because when you pass a student, they're more likely to stay enrolled and not drop out. And enrollment is how you get your money. So that is how you can be graduating 71% of your kids, but 12% of them are proficient in math. Another thing that I really didn't quite understand is just how schools can very easily manipulate data. They manipulate crime data, they manipulate arrest data, suspension data, they manipulate attendance data, and they manipulate this data to make the schools appear better on paper than
Right.
they actually are. And the data is very easy to manipulate if you're a school. And those are probably the three of the main things that I learned that really blew me away because it's pretty shocking that how the schools are not set up for the benefit of the students anymore. They're largely set up, if not solely set up, for the benefit of the adults in the school system. And that's not my words. You can read the words of the teachers and the administrators who have worked for a long time in the school systems that have come forward to say that when they're talking about decisions that they're going to make in a school, the priority is the adults, then the students.
Right. And I just want to clarify, like when you say like to incentivize the school, right? Basically, the more students that pass, the more money the school is given, right? So it doesn't
Be-
benefit you to
because
hold them back.
because of enrollment. And it's not because schools get money to pass kids. They don't. Schools get money to enroll kids. And if you pass a student, that student's more likely to stay enrolled because they see a light at the end of the tunnel, and that light is a high school diploma. If the students fail, the students are more likely to drop out because they don't think they'll ever get to the point where they can get a diploma. So that is how passing kids keep the money coming in, because it keeps them coming into the school and it keeps them enrolled.
Okay, I've got you. And of course, with manipulation of data, right? Who's going to question that? You would just assume that the data that the adults are giving you is accurate data, right?
Well, that's exactly what I thought in January 2017. I thought that when you look at a school's data, if you look at the attendance rate, if you look at the graduation rate, if you look at the dropout rate, you look at these things and you start thinking to yourself, okay, well, this is a pretty good school. But when you start really digging into it, a lot of things start not to make sense. Like, how are you graduating 71% of your kids when
Right.
12% of your kids are proficient in math? It doesn't make sense until you start to understand how the schools are really operating. And it's I'll give you another example of one of the things that I didn't really understand, that I think is very valuable for people to understand. So in America, over the past, I don't know, 5, 10, 15 years, it's been going on for quite some time. There's been a huge push against standardized testing. Schools don't like standardized testing.
Right.
And they come up with all these reasons for why they don't like it, because teachers then teach to the test, the kids aren't actually learning, they're memorizing the test, and all these other things. Well, I have a different view on that after doing this professionally every day for 9 years, investigating public education. Standardized tests are one of the few metrics in a school that cannot be manipulated,
Oh,
because the school is not sitting there with the kid taking the test. It's very easy for a kid not to show up to school, but the school mark them present anyway. It's very easy for a school to change a failing grade to a passing and matriculate that child to the next grade. It's very hard for a school to actually, if really almost impossible for a school to manipulate its standardized test scores, because the kids are taking the test by themselves. And when you look at a school, and this is what I tell a lot of people, when you look at a school, the only metric that you should look at is standardized testing, because that's the metric that cannot be manipulated. There is a school that I highlight in this book, in Failure Factory.
yeah.
There's a school in Baltimore City that had an 80, I think it was an 87% graduation rate. Now,
Okay.
Baltimore City Schools graduation rate usually hovers right around 70%, 71, 69, somewhere in there. We found a school that's graduation rate was 87%, which is the state average in Maryland. State average in Maryland is 87%.
Okay.
That sounds really good. And
Yeah.
if you're a parent, you're going to be like, wow, this school is really good. This school's graduation rate is 87%. When you look at the standardized testing for that school, there was not one student in that entire school that tested proficient in math. Not one kid, with an
Wow.
87% graduation rate. And that school is no longer open, because that school, it turns out, if you read the book, was doing some nefarious things. And that school ended up being shut down largely because of our reporting, and what we were shining a light on, what that school was doing. But it's not rare. A lot of schools are doing certain things where they're just manipulating the data that they can.
Wow, you've like I'm just speechless. I can't even. Okay, I have a question. Okay, so speaking to like the parents out there, right? Because a lot of these schools are in possibly like disadvantaged areas, right? And a lot of the parents maybe receive the same education that their kids are getting and aren't necessarily either they maybe aren't speaking up or don't know how, don't actually know what to say or how they can even start to fix something like this. So what can the people of Baltimore or any city that might be experiencing this do if they want to help fix this for their children?
There are a lot of parents in Baltimore, a lot, and I talk to a lot of them in Failure Factory that are in the situation that you just described. They were undereducated by the same school system their children now attend. We now have a generational problem. And there are parents, I've talked to them in Failure Factory, who made it to high school in Baltimore City schools who can't read. I mean, literally can't read. And I get that question a lot. Blame the parents, blame the parents, blame the parents. And I would invite people to go read this book and read the words of some of the parents that I interviewed. Imagine that you're a parent of a child and you can't read. And now your kid's going to the same school that promoted you all the way to high school knowing you couldn't read. I mean, these parents can't help their kids with their math homework. They can't help their kids with their reading or their science or social studies homework. They can't. They don't have the ability to do it. And it's now become a cyclical generational problem because the schools have been allowed to do this for so long. And that's a big reason that I wrote the book is because I think to some degree, we need as a society to stop this from happening. We need to hold the schools accountable. And we have to do it as a society because a lot of the people that are in these conditions that are going to these schools, they don't have the monetary means or the educational means to go up against the school system and challenge it. They simply don't. They're living in government housing, Section 8 housing. They're living in places where, like I spent about an hour and a half with one mom. She lived in a government controlled housing complex where she couldn't even control her own thermostat. She didn't have access to a thermostat. Her doors and her windows were screwed shut. They were bolted shut. She couldn't even open her windows. Like that's the degree of government control that a lot of these people live in. And she can't move. She doesn't have the money. She can't get out. She can't pay for private school for her kids, parochial school. She can't do any of that. It's heartbreaking. And she's stuck there because in Maryland, the way that the laws are written is you live here, this is your zoned school. That's most of how everybody goes to school in places like Maryland. Now, other places throughout the United States are changing. They're starting to adopt more freedom and parent choice and school choice with understanding that trying to get those people that are in those conditions I just described an opportunity to get out because in the current structure in Maryland and Baltimore, they can't get out. The biggest thing that they can do is vote. You have to vote in your local elections, and you have to have good school board members, good local representation. And what I mean by that, by good, is not a political party affiliation. It's people that are going to hold the school system accountable, and people who are going to say, "Okay, school, if we're going to give you this much money, you need to give us a better educated kid. And if you can't do that." Superintendent, you're gone. Principal, you're gone. Teachers are gone. And we're going to bring people in who can do it. Or we're going to give this family an opportunity to seek their own education because the quality of education you're presenting them isn't good enough. Those are the things that need to happen. There need to be options. There needs to be competition. There needs to be incentives for the schools to improve.
Okay, so then I would say what I'm hearing as well from you is, when you are voting, go and actually speak to the representatives as well and ask
Yeah.
them, what are you intending to do to help fix our school system? Really find out what they are going to say. Like, take the initiative to go out there and question these people. Don't just vote for who your friend tells you need to vote for, sort of thing. That's
Yeah.
a
And it's not that much time. It's not like I don't think that the answer here is for every parent to spend 40 hours trying to fix their school. You can't do that. You're working 30, 40, 50
yes.
hours a week. You got your kids. Like, that's not what it is. It's simply take a couple hours before an election and figure out who's running. And yeah, give them a call, give their office a call and say, hey, like my kid's school, 3% of the kids are proficient in math. What are you going to do about it? Like, are you going to hold the school accountable? Am I going to see you walking the halls of that school, talking to the principal, saying, what can I do to help you better educate these kids? Because that's what doesn't happen in Baltimore. That's what hasn't happened for decades and generations. The schools just get more money and they're not held accountable for the quality of education that the kids are receiving.
Wow. So to the teachers that are listening as well, right? I could imagine if you're a teacher in Baltimore right now, you're probably saying, this is exactly what I'm experiencing, exactly what I'm dealing with. Do the
Yeah.
teachers have, in your experience, like, do the teachers have any power? Like, what would you say to a teacher right now who said to you, do you have any advice for me?
Well, yeah, I mean, you can read the words of the teachers in Failure Factory. I talk to a lot of teachers. You
Yeah.
have to. And
Yeah.
the thing about teaching is in America, in Baltimore, in Maryland, we have a major teacher shortage. But it's not because people don't want to teach. It's because people don't want to teach in the environments that have been created in the public education system. Everything that we're talking about,
Yeah.
grade changing, pushing kids through, focusing on passing kids, not educating kids. I talked to many teachers in the book who students earned failing grades in their classes. But yet, a couple weeks later, that student walks across the stage and earns a high school diploma. I talked to a Spanish teacher, and Spanish, a foreign language, would be one of the classes that you have to take in order to graduate in Maryland.
Right.
And students were failing her class because they weren't coming, they weren't doing the work, and they received failing grades. She goes to graduation, and the kid's walking across the stage. She's like, "Well, how is this happening?" And she goes into her grade book and finds out that somebody went in and changed the failing grades. Someone changed them, an administrator did, from failing to passing. So this student can graduate. That's a demoralizing thing for a
Yeah.
teacher. The teacher spends all year with these students. The student earns a failing grade. The teacher didn't give the student a failing grade. The student earned a failing grade. But yet they walk across the stage and they graduate or they matriculate to the next grade. They go from seventh to eighth grade or second to third grade or 11th to 12th grade. Those are demoralizing things. And then you add in the lack of discipline that is in the schools because schools don't want to suspend or expel kids anymore. And you just have this chaotic situation that has led to a teacher shortage. And a lot of people say it's money, money, money. I've never had a teacher, and I'm not saying they're not out there, but I've never had a teacher tell me that they don't think they make enough money. And here's why. When you go into teaching, you know exactly how much money you're going to make.
Yeah.
The union pay scale's right there. You know how much money you're going to make year 1, you know how much money you're going to make year 15, you know how much money you're going to make year 30. You can see it right there. When teachers get into the profession, they don't get into it for the money. They get into it because they want to help kids. But then when they get into the system and they find out how the system is operating, that it's not about the kids, it's about the adults. That's when they get frustrated and they drop out or they go to a private school, a Catholic school. They keep teaching in a different setting.
Exactly, because you have to look at what is within your control, right? And what is not within your control is fixing things like grade changing and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So you have to decide what's right for you because you're absolutely right. You get into it for the kids, not for the money. And you can't let it get to you because something like what you've uncovered here, it's not within the teacher's control. The teacher has to just figure out what's the right move for them, and it has led to the shortage, definitely. So, I'm hoping that the more we expose what's going on, which is why your book is just so fantastic, is going to allow this broken system to start to slowly maybe rebuild by getting the right people in there. We can
And
only.
it can, and it
Yeah,
can. It's not that heavy of a lift. It really isn't. There are plenty of examples where it's happening right now, even in Baltimore, in Maryland, like in Failure Factory. I take readers to schools that are showing great success. The models are there. This is
right.
2026. This is 2026. We know how to educate kids. The problem is that there's so much money involved, and there's so much special interests involved that the decisions are being made to mostly benefit the adults and not the students. But all these studies that we're still doing about how kids learn, this is 2026. We've been educating kids for a really, really long time. We know how kids learn. We just need to focus on the learning of the kids and not the adults in the system.
Yeah, 100%. So, Chris, I'm curious, like, what are your plans moving forward? Are you continuing investigating Baltimore? Are you intending to go somewhere else? Or, yeah, what's the next
Well,
steps?
when we started in January of 2017, our focus was Baltimore City, and over 9 years, we have expanded to the counties around Baltimore City, and really we investigate public education in the entire state of Maryland now, and we're gonna continue doing it because we keep seeing the same things happening. More money is going into the system, but the academic outcomes for students are not improving. If anything, they're getting worse, and
Right.
we're going to keep reporting on it, and we're going to keep highlighting it because we feel that It is extremely important. And Baltimore is a really struggling city. It's a really struggling city. It used to have nearly a million people. Now it's down to about 500,000.
Oh, wow.
Every year, it's listed as one of the most dangerous places, not just in the United States, but in the Western Hemisphere. We got 28% of the students in Baltimore City are growing up in poverty. 25% of the people in Baltimore live in poverty. More people are leaving every year. Every census data that comes out, more people are leaving the city. There's 15,000 empty structures. The economy is struggling. We can't afford in America or throughout the whole world to have more Baltimores. And the argument that I'm making in Failure Factory is that the things that I just mentioned, they're not the problem. They're a symptom of the problem. The problem is that the public education system is not providing a proper education to the citizens of Baltimore, and it has not for generations. That is the argument that I make. That's the argument that a lot of teachers and administrators and school operators make in Baltimore City, that the way Baltimore is the way Baltimore is because of the public education system. And it has to improve, and it can. It can. Like there's formulas out there, there's examples out there of great success, and the focus just has to go on the students.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. So, yeah, we will definitely put the link to the book. Yeah, are you selling, is it on Amazon or any other places?
It's anywhere books are sold,
And
Amazon,
where books
Barnes&
are
and
sold.
Noble, Goodreads. Yeah, it's called, Failure Factory: How Baltimore City Public Schools Deprive Taxpayers and Students of a Future. And if you pick up a copy, I'm the easiest person to get a hold of. My website's chrispapst.com, CHRISPAPST.com. Chris Papst on all the social media accounts. Hey, pick up a copy, read it, and let me know what you think. And especially if you're a teacher or you're in public education or used to be in public education, my goal here is to really start a conversation and to improve the quality of public education. And it starts by understanding what the problem is. We can't fix a problem if we don't understand it. And I think that's what Failure Factory does. It shows you what the problem is.
Well, thank you so much, Chris, for all the work that you've done, all the work that you're doing at the moment and will continue to do, and just making people aware, like you said, of the problem and understanding that it has to come to you have to come together as a community in order to really do something about it.
People. So there's a lot that we didn't get to, but I think there's enough there that people can understand the gist of what we're
Yes.
trying to do here, and the importance of what we're trying to do here. And I
Yes.
thank you for understanding that importance and having me on to talk about our work.
Amazing. Well, yeah, thank you so much again. And I hope you have the most success with the book. I have no doubt that you will. And yeah, just have an amazing, amazing week. And thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So let's just take a second and acknowledge how I'm feeling, which is wow. It is like this conversation started to act like Tetris, where things were just were falling into place. Now it was making sense. And I just want the teachers in the United States to know, especially if you are in Maryland, that you're not imagining this or overreacting, and you are definitely not the problem. But now you have more awareness. And that is where change can actually start. So maybe your takeaway today isn't to fix the system because let's be honest, but maybe it's just to ask better questions or have more honest conversations or speak up, or maybe it's even just to make a change in your own life. And remember, as a mindset coach who specifically works with teachers, please DM me if that is something you want to consider, because that's one of the things I love doing with my clients is saying, where else can I go from here into education or out of education, depending on what you want. And if this episode resonated with you in any way, please share it with another teacher who might need to hear it and might need to understand that they are fighting against a system that they have absolutely no control over. Because the more that we understand what's going on, the more empowered we are to actually do something about it. So if you want to read more about Chris's investigation, please pick up a copy of Failure Factory. It is unbelievably fascinating. And I will see you in the next episode.